Okay, guys, in this video, we are going to get into the actual testing for the population proportion, and I'll look at a couple of examples, but the steps are going to be the same. The first thing you're going to do is read the question and focus on what is it that they want you to test. And that's going to determine whether you're going to have a left tail test, right tail test, or two tail test. So notice that the null hypothesis is always the same, just p equals to some number. And the alternative is going to be depending on what test you have. Is going to be either a two-tailed, if it says something like, we want to know whether the proportion of blah 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 is different today or it has changed. So if you see those clue words, that means that your alternative is not equal. If on the other hand they said, we want to know whether the percentage of blah 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 increased or went up, something like that, that would be a right tail test. And if it says something like decreased or went down, that would be a left tail test. Notice that you can never have anything else. Not equal, less, and more. That's it. Okay. Then you're going to use technology to get what we call the test statistic and the p-value. This is also called the z-score. A p-value depends on the z-score. For example, for a right tail test, it's the area to the right of the z-score. So the larger the z-score, the smaller the p-value, and more opportunity to reject the null hypothesis. And as before, if p-value is less than alpha, which is the level of significance, you're going to reject the null hypothesis. Otherwise, you do not. Okay, so let's look at the first example. And so in this example, they say a few years ago, 60% of Americans said that they did not trust the media. Okay. And in a recent poll of 1,010 adults, 655 stated they did not trust the media. I think that is a little bit of a weird result, but whatever. I think now it's probably like 1,000. But anyway, okay, at the alpha equals 0.05 level of significance, is there evidence to support the claim that the percentage of Americans that do not trust the media increased? Okay, so let's see what's what here. So we're looking for three things. First of all, P0, which is the null value that we're going to need to check assumptions and also put in the hypothesis. Okay, so that would be right here. This is your P0. But you have to convert it to a decimal, so this will actually be 0.6. And then we're looking for two more numbers, x and n. So x is the number of successes. So remember, x is always smaller than n. So that's your x. And then this guy right here, that would be your n. So this is n, this is x, and this right here is p0. And once you determine that, you're pretty much good to go. Okay, so first you're going to need to check the condition, which is np0, 1 minus p0, whatever that is, should be greater than or equal to 10. Now, why is it p0? And it is not the same thing as what we had for the confidence interval for proportion, where we had p hat. All the difference here is that you actually have hypothesis testing, and in hypothesis testing, the null hypothesis says that p has to be equal to p0. So we're assuming, unless evidence indicates otherwise, in the beginning before we start testing, that the value of p is still p0. So let's substitute what we know to check assumptions. So n is the bigger of the two numbers, which is 1,010, multiplied by p0. It's not 655 divided by 1,010 like you had for confidence interval. This is now going to be p0, which is the null value, which is this value right here. So this is going to be 0.6, and then it's going to be 1 minus 0.6. So this number should be greater than or equal to 10, which it is. So we're good to go, and assumptions are satisfied. Okay. So now that we checked assumptions, now let's go ahead and do the testing. So to do the test, we're going to click on the plus sign. We're going to go to the inference menu, which you already know because you did this for confidence intervals. And this time we're using proportion. So this is called z-test for proportion. This is really just those two menus. The t-test is you use that for the mean, whether it's confidence interval or hypothesis testing. The z-test is for proportion, again, whether it's confidence interval or hypothesis, depending on the situation. So for us, it's going to be z-test for proportions. So successes is always less than the sample size. So this is going to be, we put that, and so it's not red, which means we found it correctly. And let's click on create test. we're going to expand the significance test menu. And at this point, please remember, do not ever leave the value of P0 at 0.5 as it says right here. See how like this is the default? You do not want that. You want whatever it is that they gave you in the beginning of the question, which is 60%, but you put it as a decimal 0.6. Then you need to decide, okay, am I going to have a left-tailed, both tails, which is two-tailed, or right-tailed? How do I know that? Well, I have to look at the claim. The claim says, is there evidence to support that the percentage of Americans that do not trust the media increased? So this is your clue word. Because it's increased, you're going to be using the right tail test. Okay, that's it. That's it. Okay, so then clicking on the three dots, we're going to see the z-score or the test statistic. And it is larger than 3, so that is an outlier. That's an unusual situation. And as you can see, the p-value is also very, very small, which indicates that we are going to be rejecting the null hypothesis. So why? Because it's definitely going to be less than any alpha you can possibly think of. So let's see, I don't know what alpha they were using here. Okay, so they just use 0.05. So all you got to do is take, if you don't believe me that it's less, just subtract them. Because the answer is negative, it is less, which means we are going to be rejecting the null hypothesis. Now, in the conclusion, we're going to say we have enough evidence to conclude that the percentage of Americans who do not trust the media has increased. So always in the conclusion, mirror the claim. The claim said increased. That's what you have to say also. Okay, so now let's look at one more example. So this is example number 2. All right, so in example number 2, we have in 1990s, 38% of women 65 years and older lived alone. A sociologist tests whether this percentage is different today. So you can see the clue word different, which means it's going to be a two-tail test. Okay, so again, they say random sample, 500 women, 150 live alone. So what's what here? So first of all, the 38%, that is going to be your P0. This is your null value of the proportion. Then this number right here, that's your n, the larger number, and this number is your x. Okay, so with that said, let's check assumptions. So again, np0, 1 minus p0 should be greater than or equal to 10. So let's compute that. So what's n? N is 500. P0 is 38, but do not use 38. Convert that to a decimal. That's 0.38. 1 minus 0.38. Okay, this number is obviously larger than 10, so assumptions are satisfied. Okay, so we are good to go. We're going to go ahead and start testing. So what do? We click on the plus sign. We go to inference. And then we're going to go to, because it's proportion, z-test for proportion. Now, the successes here would be 150 out of 500. And then we click on create test. Okay, so let's expand the significance test menu. And now we have to again focus on that value of P0. We do not want this to stay 0.5 because that's not correct. You're going to get really weird results if you leave it like that. Your P0 is 0.38, so that's going to go in here. Okay, what else? Now we have to decide what tail we got, left, both, or right. It all depends on the claim. So look at the claim. It says, we want to know whether the proportion has changed. So changed, immediately no, not equal. So this is a two-tail test, which means we don't have to change anything here. And everything else is already done. So we're just going to go ahead and click on the three dots. We can see the z-score, or what's called the test statistic. Absolute value of it is greater than 3, so definitely unusual situation. P-value is almost 0. So again, we are going to reject the null. And when you reject the null, you have evidence. Okay, so when you reject the null, don't forget. So let's get to that place right there. There's just so many steps. But p-value is less than alpha, reject. And you do have evidence. And then the second part of that sentence has to mirror the claim. Remember, the claim said changed. So your conclusion, so you're going to have a multiple choice, must match that. Whatever is in the claim should match this.